as friends and celebrate the unity we share. All as one, keep the fire burning, kindle it with care, and we'll all join in and sing. Here we are, all together as we sing our song, joyfully. Here we are, all together as we pray we'll always be. Freedom we do shout for everybody, and until there is, we do pray, soon there will be one true family, and we'll all join in and sing. Here we are, all together as we sing our song, joyfully. Here we are, all together as we pray we'll always be. Glorify the one, with all our voices show that we're sincere. By all our deeds, shout the joys of freedom everywhere, and we'll all join in and sing. Here we are, all together as we sing our song, joyfully. Here we are, all together as we pray we'll always be. Let us make the world an hallelujah. Let us make the world a better place. Keep a smile handy, lend a helping hand, and we'll all join in and sing. Here we are, all together as we sing our song, joyfully. Here we are, all together as we pray we'll always be.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome. Welcome. Hi, John. Just want to welcome everybody. I'm so glad everybody is here and that we are all together. And I want to take a moment and light the Christ candle as soon as I find the matches. And the Christ candle is our reminder of the Christ light that lives within each one of us. And so it's that reminder that as we go out into the world each week, that we seek the light that is the spark of each and every person that we meet. And so let's go ahead and gather together and open with prayer. We thank you, God, for this time that we have together, this time to sing and to love and to learn. And I just pray that you'll be with each one of us during this time of service and worship together, and that you'll be with us as we go throughout the week. We pray these things in your name. Amen. And Mike has a song for us.
All right, this is the congregational song, so sing along. It sounds like the Battle Hymn of the Republic, so I think you don't have any excuse, so sing out. All right, number 227 in your hymnal. Mine eyes have seen the coming of an age that is to be, when from every limitation I shall know that I am free. For the age is rich in promise, and so has eyes to see. God's truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. God's truth is marching on. My soul has seen the beauty of a race from sorrow free, an age of faith and justice, truth and love and liberty. And I sing of love's great triumph in this time of jubilee. God's truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. I have seen the freeborn woman standing side by side with man. I have seen the nations brought until there is no tribe or clan, and the warlords all have vanished in the love of man for man. God's truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. God's truth is marching on. One more time. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. God's truth is marching on.
Thank you. So in the backs of each and every one of the pews, there are little slips that have our prayer requests. And one of our practices at Unity is prayer. And so on each of the slips, you can write a prayer for strength, a prayer for concern, whatever is on your heart. You may drop them in the bowl as we pass the bowls later. They can also be dropped in the back in the prayer corner or up here in the prayer box. And at the end of each month, so this is the end of the month, they're all sent to Silent Unity, and where they're prayed over for another month. So we have that. I think I have one announcement, and which is the reminder that the new daily word is available, and there are copies out on the desk. They're $3 each, and so always full of good stuff each day. I was wrong. I have another announcement. On the 5th Sunday of next month, we have Patricia Roller is going to come and speak, and she has just completed walking the Camino in Spain, and so she's going to come and share about her journey with us, and so that's very exciting. So mark your calendars.
If you haven't seen that before, you can watch the movie called The Way.
And it's an incredible movie.
It is. We'll do our affirmation first, and then you. Okay. Here, perfect. Okay, so in your bulletin, there's a little card that has our affirmation, and we're going to read together first the affirmation for unity. Co-creating with God, all of unity by the seas, wants and needs are satisfied. And if you turn it over, we have the affirmation for ourselves. Co-creating with God, all my wants and needs are satisfied. And Cheryl will read the daily word.
Good morning. So the word for today is unlimited. My divine nature is unlimited. If I look only at my day-to-day human experiences, it's sometimes hard to believe that I am an unlimited spiritual being. After all, I have errands to run, tasks to finish, or people to care for. My time and my choices can easily feel limited, but I know the truth of my soul. I take a moment to pause, to breathe, and to remember I am part of a magnificent whole, a being formed by love and light, a beloved player in this game of life. I am here with a purpose, to love and be loved, to give and receive, to choose joy even among the errands, tasks, and caregiving. This life is my opportunity to be an opening for God on the earth. My divine nature is unlimited. And the scripture from Psalm 16:11, you show me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. In your right hand are pleasures forevermore.
I've got an angel on my shoulder, urging me to fly. And if I could, I would be bolder, looking life right in the eye. So now I'm going to trust my angel, knowing help is here at hand. And then I'll rise to the occasion, and God's peace I'll understand. I've got an angel on my shoulder, asking me to grow. In all my life I'm looking over the things I used to think I know. So now I dive into my freedom. With these wings I know I can, to find a deeper kind of wisdom, and God's peace I understand. I've got an angel on my shoulder, urging me to fly. And if I could, I would be bolder, looking life right in the eye. So now I'm going to trust my angel, knowing help is here at hand. And then I'll rise to the occasion, and God's peace I'll understand. I've got an angel on my shoulder, and God's peace I understand.
Thank you, Mike. And now we'll welcome today's speaker, Patriciafaye Marshall.
Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you.
Good morning. How wonderful to come and be together and know that we have an angel on our shoulders. I'm going to be talking about some pretty concerning things this morning, and I'd like to invite us to remember that we all do have an angel on our shoulders, and with the peace of God, you know, we can always find a place where we're centered and where we're at peace and where we're at calm. So this morning, as the Amazon burns, the Amazon rainforest being the lungs of this planet, I just read that the Amazon provides 20% of the oxygen that this planet breathes. And so we might just extend our love and our concern and our thoughts to that part of the world. We refuse to bequeath a dying planet to future generations by failing to act now. We act in peace with ferocious love for these lands in our hearts. We act on behalf of life. What powerful words in the midst of a topic, in the midst of a reality that is so heavy. It is leaden beyond leaden. It is difficult to offer the proper space, the proper invitation for full consideration. I'll say it again, a refrain for this sermon, for I worry that I will leave you with too much despair. I'll say it again, for it is my hope that in our travels through climate grief that we will come out the other side with a renewed commitment to life and to action. So hear these words again. We refuse to bequeath a dying planet to future generations by failing to act now. We act in peace with ferocious love for these lands in our hearts, and we act on behalf of life. Perhaps you know in your body, perhaps you know in your head, perhaps you know in that deep place of coherence that we have moved past climate change and we have moved into climate catastrophe or crisis or constriction or chaos or collapse or breakdown or emergency. Take your pick. Instead of stopping global warming, there are those who have given up the notion of prevention and now speak of mitigation. Sometimes folks with this worldview, and perhaps this is you, speak of adaptation, with forecasts of society still being recognizable, our current linear economy more or less intact, just smaller, and there are those who speak of reversing the damage, of seeking salvation and perhaps even redemption through technology or artificial intelligence or some combination of both. Seeding the clouds, carbon capture, perhaps this is you. There are those who believe that we are well beyond the tipping point, yet believe it is irresponsible to disseminate that perspective, no matter if science backs it up, for fear that it raises too much despair, too much panic. Perhaps that is you. There are so many voices to listen to, it is overwhelming. Some of them are in resonance with each other, others contradict, and those are just the science-based ones. We can listen to Davis Wallace Wells, who wrote The Uninhabitable Earth. We can listen to Nathaniel Rich, who basically tells us that it's no one's fault that we didn't act back when we had the chance in the 80s. And at the same time, it's everyone's fault. We can listen to the prophetic fiction writers of the 1990s who knew somehow what was in store. Recently, I've been listening to Jim Bendell. He is a man from the UK who about a year ago wrote a paper called Deep Adaptation. It's a map for navigating climate tragedy. Bendell has created a community of folks largely online who have come to believe that collapse is both inevitable and imminent. They engage in this worldview not out of cynicism or masochism or sadism, but actually out of a deep sense of love, which can only serve us, while denial will cause us and the planet even more harm. Jim Bendell talks of the 4 R's. He says that the first thing to consider is resilience. And he talks about resilience by asking this question: what is most valuable to you that you would want to keep? Considering what if it really is imminent? What if this collapse is really something that's going to be overwhelming and imminent? What would you want to keep? What is so valuable to you that you would choose to keep that? Now, that could be in the area of material things. It could be in the area of behaviors that you have, practices that you have, the faith that you have. It could be in any of those areas, but to consider what it would be that you would value most, that you wanted to keep, and then to work to build that, to make that resilient in yourself. So for myself, I know my own spiritual practice, my meditation practice, is one of the things that I value the most in my life. And no matter what happens in the outside world, I want to be able to keep that on a daily basis, maybe more than once a day, but really returning to that as often as possible, where we know that angel is on our shoulders, where we know that we're held, where we know that there's a place where we are safe. Our physical bodies may not be safe, but there is a place in us where we can find that safety. So resilience is his first R. His second R is relinquishment. He says, okay, so if this collapse is coming, what might we be willing to let go of that would enable us to have a fuller life? What might we let go of that if we kept it would actually be harmful to the situation? So again, in the areas of both material things, maybe you would give up driving, maybe you would give up flying, maybe you would give up beef. I mean, it's on and on. What are the things that you would give up? Maybe you would give up blaming Exxon or someone else outside yourself. Blame. So resilience, relinquishment. The third one is restoration. So he asked the question, what would you want to bring back that we had in earlier times that seemed to provide for a more sense of connection, a more sense of community? I mean, there was a time in this country, when our grandparents shared things. They used the same tools. They used the same, I guess when tractors came into being, the same tractor. They used things, they shared things, and they got together. They weren't just always isolated in their homes on their devices. They were actually out in community together, building community, singing, dancing together, appreciating life together. These are things. Gardens is another thing that we might want to restore, to bring back the idea of growing our own food, because they talk about one of the first things that we're going to notice is in the area of food depletion. That's going to come first from the droughts, from the floods. I mean, while the Midwest has been flooded for the last 4 or 5 months, and there's not going to be a harvest there this year. I read that the Midwest supplies grain for we export 40% of the world's grains. There's not going to be a harvest this year. So we might, we might consider starting now to eat a plant-based kind of diet rather than having so much meat in our diets. So restoration, what could we bring back to help us in these difficult times? And the fourth one, which he added as an afterthought, and I think this one is so important because I think this is where all of our fear comes from. The fourth one is reconciliation. And when he talks about reconciliation, the bottom line of that is reconciling ourselves to our own demise. Really getting present. Instead of the angel on our shoulders, like Carlos Castaneda said, we might walk with death on our shoulders at all times. Carlos Castaneda said that was the only time we could really be present in life, was when we were present to the delicacy of life and present to our own death. So reconciling ourselves, they're even talking about human extinction, that we're in the 6th great extinction, and humans as animals are included in that. So by the end of the century, there's a lot of folks that believe that the human race will be extinct. So, as I look around this room, we're all sort of old. It's like, I know that I think about death. I think about that last moment. I think about how I want it to be. I want it to be pretty much the way I live. I'd like to be preaching, and just take my last breath and lay down. That would just be ideal. But today, I'd rather it not be today, but it could be, Jim. But also reconciling ourselves with where we might have grievances, where there might be places where we're still not talking to our sister or our brother or our ex-husband or whoever it is that we got so mad at 30 years ago. We don't even remember what it's about, but we know we don't talk to him anymore. That kind of thing, making peace, making amends, asking for and offering forgiveness. Seems to be a place that really makes a big difference with people. And can you see that even if we didn't have this horrible thing called climate change, that these would all be good things to do anyway? These would all be good things for us to engage in anyway, right? So I know Paul Hawken, when he talks about climate change, he asks the question, is climate change happening to us, or is it happening for us? Because if it's happening to us, we're just victims, you know. We got the short end of the stick. We were born at the wrong time. You know, the corporations are doing it to us. We're just these poor little, you know, but if it's happening for us, well, that's a whole different idea, isn't it? Why in the world what would it be happening for us? What could that be all about? Well, maybe it's so we do these 4 R's and get our lives in order. Maybe it's so that we stop using fossil fuels, which is not sustainable anyway. All the solutions to climate change are things that we ought to be doing anyway, either for the environment or for issues of social justice, or just to make our human race a safer, more loving species. You know, the things that we want to do to mitigate or slow down or stop or reverse global warming are things we ought to be doing anyway. So in that way, climate change is happening for us. I mean, I think it may be like a reset. I think it may be like, you know, everything is really up now. You know, it's like, and so if it is, then this is an opportunity for a reset. You know, maybe 6 billion of us are going to have to die. But maybe those that are left are going to be the ones that rebuild and create heaven on earth. Maybe they're going to be a higher consciousness than we have been. Because when we evolve, we always evolve to a higher level of order. I mean, that has been the nature, and now human being has evolved to be at the very top of that. But we're not perfect yet, you know, and so maybe that next level of human being will be those folks that can really create heaven on earth, and maybe in that way climate change is happening for us. So I've been following Jim Bendel. I'll just tell you that I discovered this movement called Deep Adaptation, I think it was in May. And since May, I have been probably way too many hours a day listening to podcasts and just trying to get through my own grief. Because, I mean, climate change was present for me, but it was still a ways off. I mean, I was more concerned about my grandkids' lives than I was about mine. I really had not stopped long enough to consider that all the, you know, IPCC reports and all the things that we get are so conservative. And so when you start looking back beyond mainstream media, you can find these things, these movements like Deep Adaptation, like Extinction Rebellion, both of those coming out of Europe. So I just, 3 or 4 times a day when I first discovered this, I would just sit and watch a podcast and cry. And just cry and cry. And like, I mean, deep, belly sob, cry. And just, you know, and I still do. I mean, I think I'm crying a little less. But what I found out was that after I would cry, there would be this kind of, I would get up and just walk out on my deck, and there were these great trees, and there was, you know, I was present to my life and to the joy and to the gratitude in my life. And the waves of grief would keep coming. And they've been coming ever since May, and I'm still not through it. I mean, I watched one just last night and cried a lot again. But I think that we need to hold each other, and I don't necessarily mean that literally, but I could mean it literally, as we cry. And I think that as things get worse, that is the value of your spiritual Community here is to be available to one another, to hold one another, to embrace, to feel the compassion and the empathy, and also the curiosity, though. Just remaining, Jim Bendel's 3 words are grieve, play, love. And so he has really introduced that whole idea of coming together as human beings in community and holding and supporting one another, sharing, connecting. We're so disconnected. We're so disconnected from one another, and we're so disconnected from nature. That's the whole thing, how the planet got into the difficulty that it's in, is because we just thought we were separate from all of that, and that nature was just here as a resource for us to use. Not that, it was finite and it was going to be gone. So there's an opportunity for a lot of growth. Uncertainty and lack of control are the key aspects that's kind of like how it's going to be as things unfold. We're going to become less and less certain of what tomorrow will bring, where our food is coming from, where our water is coming from, and we certainly will lose any idea of being in control. We're at 415 parts per million right now of carbon in the air. Human beings have never lived when we've been that high. I forget, I think it's 60 billion years, 60 million years or something. I get the M's and the B's mixed up, but it's been a very long time since carbon has been this high, and it was before human beings were on the planet. And we're destined to, raise 2 degrees centigrade. That's already locked in. I think it's at 1.7 now above industrial times, but we're pretty, with the carbon that's in the air and the life of the carbon dioxide that's in the air, we're locked into a 2-degree raise. And so with all of that and the methane that's going to be released in the Arctic or in the permafrost, that's going to cause even more temperature rise and sea level rise and all of that. And the thing about methane is that it's way hotter than carbon dioxide. Doesn't live as long. I think it stays in the atmosphere, I'm going to say 5 years, whereas carbon stays there a lot longer than that. I'm not sure exactly, but more than 100 years. I've got scientists in the room, I know. So anyway, we're sort of cooked. And Bendel encourages us to return to compassion, to return to curiosity, and to return to respect. Bendel is just one voice in the environmental movement that is called Extinction Rebellion. And it also started in Europe last May. Do any of you know about Extinction Rebellion? Okay, they are really patterning their agenda after Gandhi's and Martin Luther King's with regards to civil disobedience, nonviolent civil disobedience. And so last April, they had about 10,000 people come out in London, and they had 3 or 4 different locations, and they just occupied the areas and wouldn't move. And so the police came, and they were mostly old people, and these guys would just kind of lay back and let one policeman take one arm and one the other, and one leg, and they were all smiling, and they took them off to jail and booked them and turned them loose again, and they went right back and were demonstrated. So they kept rearresting the same people for a number of times. And these people were really happy to get arrested. So the idea is to be disruptive enough so that you get the attention of the ruling elite, so that somebody finally understands that this is a big deal, somebody in power, somebody that can maybe do something about it. If anything can be done, they could demand certain actions at a certain level. So there's another huge one coming up this October 7th. And not only are they going to be in London, I think it's 5 cities in England, plus they're going to be in Berlin and Paris and New York. There are 50 countries now, just in 1 year of Extinction Rebellion existing, that has a chapter or a group of Extinction Rebellion in their countries. So there's a lot of participation in that. Okay, let's see where I am. Their theme is, with love and peace, we rebel for life. And Greta Thunberg, you guys know who she is, right? Greta is the 16-year-old Swedish girl, the autistic Swedish girl, you know, who stopped going to school on Fridays last year and went down to her parliament and sat out on the steps and with a sign that was like, "Why go to school? I have no future. You know, you're doing nothing about my future. Why?" You know, and she's become internationally known. She's actually right now, as we speak, on a sailing yacht powered by solar panels, crossing the Atlantic Ocean to New York to be present in New York on September 20th, which is the next day of climate strike, when all the schools, we're working with 350.org in Portland. They're the ones that are really organizing this. If there's anything that you can do in your communities to just show up with signs at the city hall or whatever to recognize the climate strike, it's September 20th. So Greta will be attending that, and then she's off to a climate conference in Chile right after that. I'm not sure how she's getting from New York to Chile, but probably on the same sailing yacht, because she won't fly. You know, it's like too big of a carbon footprint to fly. I am drawn to Extinction Rebellion and the people creating its culture because there is explicit intersectionality, by which I mean there is attention to how dominance over nature connects with other forms of dominion, and that we cannot end dominion over nature without attending to all forms of cultural oppression, the struggle for climate justice. Extinction Rebellion says it is also the struggle for racial, gender, sexual, and economic equality. A few months ago in Portland, Oregon, where there is a very large chapter of Extinction Rebellion, they held an action outside the ICE building recognizing the interconnection between immigration justice and climate justice. They have a handbook called This Is Not a Drill. You can find it online. It's 160 pages. And whether or not we thrive or not, this handbook includes some very, very important information. It includes a declaration of emergency which ends with these 3 lines, which we have said before. We refuse to bequeath a dying planet to future generations by failing to act now. We act in peace with ferocious love of these lands in our hearts. We act on behalf of life. So we've been getting reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change since 1988. They were giving those reports on I think every 2 years until about 2014, and then they started giving a report every year. And then we got this big report last October where they said we had 11 more years to make a difference. And now another report came out right at the beginning of this month, and they upped the ante on that. And now another report is due. I think it's supposed to come out this September. And this report is specifically on the oceans and what they call the cryosphere. The cryosphere is the ice. It's any frozen area So whether it's a glacier or snowpack or permafrost or ice sheets or icebergs or whatever it is, it's all the places that are covered in ice. And that is supposed to be, it's already being touted as being a very scary report and even closer in time to where we are now. We hope that this will just go away, right? So this is called climate denial. There are lots of stages of climate denial. I know that most people that I have wanted to talk to or tried to talk to in McMinnville, mostly I just get this kind of glazed, people just look at me like they have no idea, like I'm speaking another language. So I do pick up the signals, so I don't usually push it, except for those people. There are a few people who have come to terms with this and who are listening to the podcast on deep adaptation and extinction rebellion, and we've started to have little get-togethers of people where we just come together at a potluck, 9-10 people, and look at a podcast and talk about it together. Sometimes I think that the best thing we can do is talk about it with each other. Just open the conversation and see if there's anybody there who really wants to share or wants to talk about it. Because I think when we're isolated, the fear is much greater than if we're in community and talking about it. We think that, that if we just keep doing, we're all good people, and if we just keep recycling and maybe we drive an electric car, or maybe we've decided not to use our clothes dryer anymore or our air conditioners anymore, or whatever it is that we personally feel like we can do, that somehow it'll just magically all turn out, and maybe it will. I believe that the more we know about the climate emergency, the less hope we feel. And sometimes hope is what keeps us going. And it depends, I think, a lot on what we're hoping for. I hope for stillness. Your big sign back here, peace, be still. I hope to maintain some kind of faith, some kind of centeredness, some kind of peace inside myself, no matter how much is raging outside. I think of people that we've heard stories about, people who meditate in war zones, and those, to be able to be sitting there with the bullets whizzing past and to be able to actually stay in that calm center, that's a feat. That's something I don't think we could just do all of a sudden. I think it requires practice, and so we can definitely be practicing that kind of stillness now. Taking seriously the possibility of crisis or collapse means that some of us will learn ways of living better, ways of making peace, and ways of bringing healing. Whether collapse happens or not, learning these ways and living into them is always a good thing. The Buddhist teacher Joanna Macy says this: being fully present to fear, to gratitude, to all that is, we discover that we belong. We can develop a practice of mutual belonging and find ways to remember to celebrate and affirm this deep knowing of our inner existence. We belong to each other. We belong to the living body of earth, and nothing can ever separate us. We are already home. The practice of mutual belonging is the medicine for the sickness of the self-isolated ego, and the practice will accompany us through these hard times. Not only must the corporations stop business as usual, but we must stop business as usual too. We must do it soon. We must do it now, for time is ever so short. We refuse to bequeath the dying planet to future generations by failing to act. Now we act in peace with ferocious love of these lands in our hearts. We act on behalf of life. I'm going to end with a poem by Wendell Berry. When despair grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives might be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Amen, and may it be so.
Thank you, Patriciafaye. So now is that time when we get to give back to our community. And so we are going to take the offering in just a moment. And so what I'd ask is that each of you take your gift and you hold it in your hands or hold it against your heart and say with me, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Amen. Thank you, Tom.
179 during the offertory. Love is something if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something if you give it away, you end up having more. Just like a magic penny, hold it tight and you won't have any. Lend it, spend it, and you'll have so many, they'll roll right over the floor. For love is something if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something if you give it away, you end up having more.
We are so thankful for the gifts that are given here today that helps sustain this community, and that we just pray that these gifts will just be multiplied, not only in this community, but in the hearts of each and every person that we come in contact with this week. We pray this in your name. Amen. And Mike has a song for us.
My peace I give unto you. It's a peace that the world cannot give. It's a peace that the world cannot understand. Peace to know, peace to live, my peace I give unto you. My give unto you. It's a joy that the world cannot give. It's a joy that the world cannot understand. Joy to know, joy to live, my joy I give unto you. My love I give unto you. It's a love that the world cannot give. It's a love that the world cannot understand. Love to know, love to live, my love I give unto you. It's a love that the world cannot understand. My love I give unto you.
Thank you, Mike. And now we'll have Michael come and read our unity statement for peace.
Good morning. Please join me in reading our statement for peace. It's in your bulletin on a brown paper. Unity stands for peace in the presence of conflict, for love in the presence of hatred, for forgiveness in the presence of injury. Unity honors the many names for God, the many paths to God, the many ways to worship God. For there is only one power and presence of God, and that God loves each one of us equally. It is therefore the position of unity to urge all nations, their leaders and their people, to turn to God by whatever the name for guidance during these challenging times, and to pursue peace, not war. For this is what honors the God of all our faith traditions. Unity stands for peace in our lifetime. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And they shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord. I will not be the part of the killing of any child, no matter how lofty the reason. Not my neighbor's child, not my child, not my enemy's child, not by bomb, not by bullet, not by looking the other way. I will be the power that is peace.
So let's go ahead and join in our circle. So as we gather in the circles, just take an opportunity to place any names of our loved ones and those who we know that just might be a little extra.
and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be, with God as creator, family all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my joyous vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
And we'll close with the prayer of protection.
The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.
All right. And go, God.